safety, which obviously the DGCA looks at on an annual basis. When it comes to this kind of an enhanced surveillance, what is it that they will be looking at, and how will this impact as far as the safety standards on other airlines as well, including Spicejet, is concerned?
Well, enhanced surveillance basically means that the frequency of surveillance, inspections, audits will be increased. Now, safety is basically dependent on three main factors. You have people, processes, and technology. DGCA cannot be present everywhere in every organization or at every departure. So they delegate the responsibility of safety to the head of safety or the quality manager in case of engineering. And they have processes like the safety management system. So the entire safety process is enshrined in the safety management system. The process handles safety, identifies the threats and risks, and mitigates them in order to assure the minimum acceptable level of safety performance. Third is the technology, which means you have spares, the aircraft, the rotables, which are high in cost, and they need to be maintained. They have certain standards. So DGCA, in terms of enhanced surveillance and inspections, can only check like the spot audits, inspections they have carried out, 43 or 50. So number of aircraft ramp inspections at the aircraft at departures or arrivals, or to the engineering, the spares where they have the stores, or the aircraft, actual aircraft in-flight inspections. So these are the kind of inspections that can be carried out. But repeatedly, we have seen since 2019, when there were a spate of incidents, especially with Spicejet, a special audit was carried out on all the airlines. And the basic things failed. The safety management system was found deficient, not implemented properly in case of Spicejet. The flight data monitoring was not being carried out. Long landings were not being checked. In another airlines, they found that the snags, the defects were not being reported. So this is a systemic error. In the Air India Express accident at Calicut, the report clearly says that there is a practice of not reporting snags on the book, but verbally telling it to the engineer. And that was also a contributory cause. In other places also, we have seen the similar issue. So it is a cultural issue of not reporting and hiding facts. How does DGCA ensure that there is enhanced surveillance? DGCA needs to, like the banks do, if RBI suspects that a bank is not performing or involved in something which is irregular, so they appoint their own people in the board, on the board of the banks, or to oversee the day-to-day functioning of the banks. So similarly, DGCA needs to appoint as an immediate step an official who is within the organization and has a day-to-day oversight of the functioning of the airline. So that is the immediate step. In the long term, they need to correct the people they have appointed. In the past 2019 and 22, they have replaced the head of safety, which means clearly the person who was delegated to by the DGCA to run the safety function did not perform. The processes did not perform. Technology did not perform. So it was an overall collapse of the safety machinery, which needs to be understood. So there has to be a person inside who has to rebuild. There can be a third-party audit like the recent unfortunate accident, helicopter accident at the rig, the Pawan Hans accident. So the ONGC employees refused that they will not travel by Pawan Hans unless a third-party audit is conducted. So an organization was selected to do a third-party audit. So we have regular audits. So the regular audits fail to highlight these issues, which are highlighted only in the special audits. And the special audits happen because of media pressure or people asking questions.
Okay.
Day to day, if you see statistics in 2019, when there was no COVID or no financial issues, the number of incidents was also high. We have about 55 incidents per month, as per the statistics, and number of departures. If you see,
Mr. Singh, you made a very an interesting point there about culture of cover-ups and on safety issues. In fact, I'd like to take this question across to Mr. Kaul there. Would you like to respond to this culture of cover-up on safety issues that Mr. Singh has raised?
Well, I mean, he's right. There is a culture of cover-up, but then no. unless this is rectified by a superior, government orders, government functioning, this continues. It has been going on for a long time. So what are known as incidents or minor incidents are covered up, and accidents are only taken. Even accident reports are not coming out on time. I'm talking about over the last couple of decades. Accidents are not taken that seriously. There is covered up. So this also needs to be investigated, but that's a long-term thing. It is happening. It is there.
Okay. And also another point that I wanted to ask you, will grounding of flights, now this is clearly a crisis of credibility and safety, so will grounding of flights actually address the entire issue of safety concerns? You've grounded 50% of Spicejet flights. They've already said that, they were functioning at less than 50% operations there. But will this actually address in reality the larger issue of safety concerns across all carriers?
Well, I think technically no. Because, if they have a bigger fleet and you ground 50% of the fleet, what do you do with the rest of the fleet? You can't sack people all the time. So the crew, the pilots, everybody will have to be paid. That's going to add more to the loss. Once you have greater losses, your safety will be still one of the factors that will likely to be sacrificed. So I don't know whether that's I hope others will agree with me, but grounding of airline, you can ground one aircraft, but 50% of the fleet will have a more serious impact. So I don't know.
Yeah, Mr. Kaul, I think there's a clarification here. I think the clarification here is that it's not the flights or the aircraft that have been grounded 50%. It is the flight schedule that has been curtailed 50%. So I think there's a basic difference, over there between the two. And you would agree that there's a big difference, operationally speaking, in terms of the impact that has on ground. I just want to quickly bring in Amit Singh on one point, and that's the point that I raised right at the beginning. Now, Captain Amit Singh, right at the beginning, I raised this issue of MELs that was there in the show cause notice. This is dated 5/7/2022. I'm going to refer to the order of 18th July 2022, where they talk about the engineering related occurrences. Again, over here, the mention is of the increasing trend of MEL releases. In technical terms, explain to our viewers, what does this really mean? If this is carried out at a regular basis, what are the risks involved, and how does this technically actually put the aircraft or expose it potentially, not just the aircraft, but the crew, the passengers, everyone, to more risks or reduced in terms of safety standards when the aircraft is airborne?
So the whole aviation industry, the basic premise is, and of the regulations that are made to facilitate travel. So it is not that if there is a malfunction or if an equipment is defective or partially functioning, that the flight will not proceed or is unsafe. So the manufacturer makes a minimum equipment list, which means that if one particular equipment is not functioning and is declared inoperative, then the flight can still continue with the level of safety guaranteed by the manufacturer. That equipment list is then approved or is more restrictive when DGCA approves it, and could be more restrictive when the operator approves it. So it depends on the levels. But still, the MEL is there to carry forward or to continue a flight with a defective or an inoperative item. Now, if one system is affected, you can have a system under, or a part of the system under, minimum equipment list without any safety hazard. Then if you have another system, 2 or 3 systems, individually they can be dispatched under MEL. But when 3 of them are there on the same flight, then what is the interaction between the 2 systems and the complication caused by the individual failures coming together? That needs to be understood by the operator and by the pilots who accept the MEL. Same is the case with the failures. Like the head of DGCA and the CMD of Spicejet have said that 30 incidents have happen every day, and they are very minor. But when a safety expert looks, they look at if there's a combination of these failures, that could become an incident or a serious incident. Individually, they may be trivial incidents, but when there's a combination, so that is when an accident happens, when there is tight coupling of situations and of equipment. We have seen it in the past of number of accidents that very minor issues have coupled to snowball to become big ones. Same is the case with the MEL. If you dispatch an aircraft with multiple MELs, then the complication which arises or the crew who handles the complication in case of another failure in flight. So we have to look at that. You have been dispatched with 3 failures. What if another failure happens in the same system or in another system? And how is the interaction with them? So that complicates the whole issue. That is why there is a restriction on the number of MELs.
Well, absolutely. And I want to take that across to Jitendra Bhargav, because Jitendra Bhargav, this is a very, very important point being raised here by Captain Amit Singh. Because, you know, one totally takes your point of COVID being a very difficult time for airlines, where they've had very few numbers. There have been so many issues, from HR issues with several of them, not just here in India. Lufthansa, in fact, has its employees on strike even as we're speaking, and that sent international air schedules into a tizzy with hundreds of flights being cancelled or being delayed. So there are obviously very serious problems with aviation. Of course, the price of ATF also going up close to 3%, 3 times in the span of 1 year, which would have obviously squeezed margins. But does that mean that this increasing trend of MELs, and it perhaps is not just restricted to Spicejet, perhaps there are other airlines also doing it and we just don't know enough about it, because this is something that certainly raises some serious concerns about whether this has become a regular practice, because it's not one, but at least 2 DGCA notices that themselves mention this.
You know, Madhavan, I'm glad you brought the global scenario into the picture. I was in US till a week ago. The number of flights being cancelled and delayed are humongous. Heathrow Airport, for the first time in the history of global aviation, has sent out letters to all the operators and said, you can only operate so many flights, cancel the other flights, because we do not have adequate manpower to manage the number of passengers at Heathrow Airport. Now, this is unprecedented. Delta has cancelled flight, Lufthansa has carried, British Airways all have carried. Now, there is a genuine constraint as far as manpower is concerned. And we got to realize this fact that Spicejet is also going through a similar kind of a thing. They do not have adequate technical people. DGCA, I'm sure, has observed in their audit that they were overusing the aircraft maintenance engineers, and therefore that led to certain incidents in the preceding 5-6 months that we witnessed to it. And that's why this order of DGCA is very pertinent, that they have assessed the manpower that Spicejet has, and if they were to operate the normal working hours, this is the number of flights that they will manage. So this is how the order has been done, but it's an unfortunate part that, yes, the airline has got a bad name, let's not dispute it. But what we should also remember is that the incident started in the month of May. Did it affect the load factor of Spicejet? The answer is no. It still had the highest load factor amongst Indian carriers. So will people know that, yes, there is a problem that they're going at, but they are not going to compromise to an extent where the safety of a flight is jeopardized. They are going through a difficult time. So we must give credit to DGC, as I said. Spicejet has been served a warning. They will ensure that, look, we can't be ruining our image that they built over a period of time. And as Mr. Sanat Kaul very rightly mentioned at the beginning of the program, it's the economics of Indian aviation. Let's not forget, if there are 30 airlines that have been established since 1992 when these skies were opened up for private airlines, 75% of the airlines are not operating. And it's not operating because they can't make them economically viable. Every airline has been chasing market share at the expense of profitability. They're selling ticket below the cost of producing a seat. India is a price-sensitive market. This is the price we're going to pay. But it cannot still say that we will compromise on safety. And that's the message should be delivered to Spicejet. Pull up your socks. You got 8 weeks' time. And after this, you should be as good as anybody or what you were 5 years ago.
Right. Mr. Bhargava, since we're already talking about economic viability over here, and for a long time we've seen several airlines in that sense, facing a financial crunch. We've also spoken about, certain, in the past we've seen employees of Indigo and Go Air, Go First now also, going on mass leaves. They've essentially, because they are not being paid, they've time and again complained of not being paid enough. And of course, even because of the pandemic, we're seeing that these airlines are bleeding. Are we looking at more such, situations in the future? More airlines and their staff going on mass leaves? I want to bring in Mr. Dabania here. How can the airlines really... What can the airlines really
The
do here to
employees,
address
the
this issue?
grass is greener on the other side. They believe we are not being paid a full emoluments here, and they're trying to look for a job in a new airline. What is the future of the new airline 2 years from now is something to be looked at. Now, this is a simple kind of a thing. They're just trying to look at, today I'm not getting my full salary in Indigo. Let me move to Air India and let me move to Akasa Airline, etc. But question is, will you get your full emoluments there? That's the question people need to be asking.
All right, Mr. Damana, your take on this. What can the airlines really do here to solve that bigger problem of, of staff going on mass leaves? Ultimately, of course, risking passenger safety there.
Of course, this is one of the major things. This is the internal airline HR issue. Basically, this is the human resources department of the airlines, which has to come up with some incentive scheme. They need to retain their employees. They need to keep their employees happy. They need to study the market and see, of course, if there is higher demand for pilots, if there is higher demand for cabin crew, they have to come up with the salaries which were there being paid pre-pandemic levels. If they are not going to pay the salaries, or if they're not going to keep the employees happy, of course, there is going to be a staff shortage. And of course, in the end, airlines are going to suffer because of course, strikes, maybe in terms of mass leaves of cabin crew, which we have recently seen, or maybe technicians going on strike. And ultimately, it is only going to affect the passenger who's paying for all this. And due to their airlines' greed for money of earning more profits, maybe trying to manage money by cutting the employee's salary and trying to appropriate it towards some other cost, they are going to suffer in the end. So they have to get their house in order. The HR people of the airlines have to act very fast on this, because this has become an industry issue. This is happening with multiple airlines.
Right, multiple airlines there. Mr. Kaul, please, your opinion needed here, because we're seeing Jet, Akasa also joining the carrier list in the near future. With growing number of airlines entering the aviation market that's already facing a financial crunch, do you think that we might see more of such snags, more of such technical glitches, more of employees reportedly going on strikes, going on mass leaves?
Well, I think so, yes. And that's mainly because the old airlines, who, unlike Akasa and Jet, which are new after coming in after post-COVID, have a lot of liabilities to pay. And therefore, there is a need for government to look into it. After all, the lockdown was not done by the airlines themselves. It was not a voluntary lockdown. It was a compulsory lockdown made by the government. So isn't there a sense of responsibility on the government to ensure that the health of these airlines, which got impacted because of the lockdown, is in a way revived in some form or the other? Now, one obvious solution is that you can lower the taxes a bit. You can reduce the number of taxes on the airline. In fact, the revenue won't fall down because the number of passengers will go up. If you are able to ensure that the ticket prices also come down a bit, this is a very price-sensitive market. You can have the same amount of revenue, if not more, if you do that. Somebody has to find out what is the elasticity of tax price, of taxes on airline ticket. If that is done, I'm sure that revenue for the government will not come down, and it will be helpful to the airline. And there'll be more passengers coming in, shifting from railways to airlines. So the low-cost carriers will not suffer. The government will not suffer. But that's my gut feeling. One has to do a proper analysis of that.
Okay, then in that case, let me bring in Madhav over here. Madhav, your take on this viability of what Mr. Kaul has suggested on lowering of the taxes and the various recommendations. Do you think this is a viable option for the government to intervene and perhaps ensure passengers are safe?
Well, this is something the government has often been talking about, and particularly as far as ATF is concerned, there have been letters written to all state governments to actually implement this. I believe at the last count, about 15 state governments have positively responded and have reduced the rates of VAT or the state tax as far as ATF is concerned. And there are still several other states which are yet to respond. Yes, this has certainly been a key demand of the aviation industry for several years now. It's not something new, and I think all the experts on this panel will certainly agree that that will give a huge boost, not just to tourism, but also to other forms of economic activity. Because remember, when you have more air flyers coming in, your economic activity, your access to not just tier 1, but tier tier 2, tier 3 cities. And remember, the regional connectivity scheme has really opened up newer avenues for connections to various tier 3 cities across the country. So it's really about taking that kind of economic activity to these areas. Recently, for instance, Temple Town of Devgarh, for instance, that has seen air connectivity being opened up by the central government, not just from the national capital, but from Calcutta, but from different parts. In fact, a very key pilgrimage spot that did not have an airport, and that really many believe with the setting up of an AIIMS there even is going to really increase the kind of economic activity that we're seeing in one region. So that's just one example to show how aviation, if it really penetrates further deeper into rural parts of the country, can make a huge difference. That's been an argument all along, and that's certainly, of course, an expectation that many have, that the aviation industry is expected to go through. Yes, the RCS scheme has been hit by various factors, including COVID, including various other aspects which were perhaps not foreseen, but perhaps it's time now to push that further and to ensure that these schemes and these plans once again go along the planned path that the government originally had. Perhaps Mr. Jitendra Bhargav could weigh in on this aspect, being a veteran in this industry.
You see, we are having heard everyone and the points made here. Madhavan, we need to get back to JRD Tata, what he said, and let me quote him. In his speech, End of an Era, that was Air India prior to nationalization, 22nd June 1953, describing the state of the airlines at that time, because government had nationalized on the thing of safety issues. He said, it is not the high cost of operations, but the uneconomically low fares being offered by airlines that are leading to losses. And we are finding the same scenario today. We can keep getting to the government and say, reduce the taxes, let us operate. But the fact is, if airlines have to blindly chase market share at the expense of profitability, offer fares which are far below the cost of producing a seat, sooner or later, they will collapse. And now the competition is between the low-cost airlines, so it will be even more intense than what it was between the full-service carriers. And let's not forget, Vistara is a fabulous airline. Kingfisher was a wonderful airline. So was Jet Airways. Has Vistara been able to make profit? The answer is no. They got to just benchmark their fares 200 rupees, 300 rupees more than what Indigo does. And they cannot recover the cost of food or the kind of, because low-cost airlines have high density of seats. And the full-service carriers have at least 30 seats less on an aircraft. So it is the economics that is governing Indian aviation industry. And when you do not make profit for a long time, you do not get fresh infusion of funds, all that you do is cut corners.
Right, Mr.
And
Bhargav,
land up in a situation which Spicejet has done today. And we have been warning these things. You see, let's not also ignore a statement made by Ajay Singh about a month ago, that there is a need to increase the fares by a minimum 10-15%. But the question is, who's swapping the airlines? It's all a question of, I will not be the first one because I will lose my market share. So there has to be some kind of discipline within the industry. Vinay Dubey has gone on record to say, we'll be offering affordable fares to the people. The question is, are those affordable fares sustainable by the airline? The answer is no. So we got to find an answer, leave the question with the airlines. It is in your interest to take a good study. Okay. You've got expertise in the industry. Not just don't chase passengers by offering ridiculously low fares which do not cover the cost of operations.
All right. I'd like to give a last word to Mr. Kaul. I know he wanted to make a point. He was raising his hand up. Mr. Kaul, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I understand that DGCA has fixed minimum prices between A and B point, the routes. If that has been done, and that is allowed under the Aircraft Act, predatory prices and excessive prices, both are mentioned in the Act. So if they've done that, then to some extent, this kind of a thing of bringing down the price very low at the cost of all airlines suffering losses has been met up to a point. So I'm not very clear how are they fixing these prices, and are they changing these prices every fortnight, a month, because you have to calculate for that. But that is one solution to the problem just now, to bring a minimum quality of health financial health to the airlines by doing this. Otherwise, there's cutthroat competition and they keep lowering the prices and then suffer losses. So it is also a question of over competition, over surplus capacity, and all these things together make the entire industry unhealthy, financially unviable.
So basically a mix of reasons over there, right from low pay to financial crunch to, of course, the vendors being unpaid or vendors being paid less and spare parts are unavailable. All of these, of course, risking passenger safety there. On that note, I'd like to wrap this discussion up. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us this evening and sharing your perspective. Well, it's time to slip into a short break now, but stay tuned. Lots more on the other side.